Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And the most important updates are coming today from Sumy and Kharkiv area. And when talking about Sumy, just during the previous April, about 110,000 new migrants left Sumy region for the western part of Ukraine. Sumy area is not so populated as, let's say, other parts of Ukraine for many reasons. For the first one is that the region is located very close to the line of combat contact, so lots of people have already abandoned their houses and their homes even in 2022 and 2023. Now these 110,000 soldiers are the last wave, probably one of the last waves of migration from this part of Ukraine, and 110,000 people is a very big number for this region, obviously. But much worse information, much worse data is coming from Kharkiv area. Today we got a very terrible and very difficult video, this one. If you take a look at this video, you're gonna see a very big traffic of cars, of people, of civilians heading from Kharkiv towards the western part of Ukraine. And just pay attention to a few important things. As you can see, there are two roads, there are 4 lines, there are 2 roads and 4 lines. 2 lines of one road goes from Kharkiv, let's say, to the central and the western part of Ukraine, and 2 more lines of the second road goes to Kharkiv itself. And as you can see, the situation is so difficult with significant number of cars and people who try to run away from the town. So that's why the civilians and probably the locals were forced to start using additional line of let's say reverse movement to run away from Kharkiv. Obviously this is the breaking the, let's say, driving law. Of course it's not allowed to do like this, but people don't have any other option. They are using everything they can just to evacuate and run away from Kharkiv as soon as possible, saving their lives. And the thing is that the question is why the Ukrainians, why the civilians, why the people of Kharkiv did decide to run away from the city. Of course, there are a few reasons of that, and the most important one is that during the previous weeks the Russians destroyed the Kharkiv power plants. This is the first Kharkiv power plant, number 5, that was destroyed during the march. The second power plant was destroyed in the vicinity of the city by the name of Slobozhanska. This is Miivska power plant, and there were lots of days in a row when we have complete blackout in the area. But even the absence of electricity is also not the most important reason why the Ukrainians decided to leave Kharkiv. The most important one is this video. If you take a look at this video, you're gonna see of how the Russians were bombing and attacking Kharkiv with FAB 1500 and FAB 500. So this is the main reason why the Ukrainians decided to leave and abandon Kharkiv completely. The Russians are no longer using missiles, the Russians are no longer using drones. They don't need this because it's too expensive, obviously, to use drones and missiles. They're too expensive. Now the Russians managed to improve their, first of all, the Russians managed to suppress the Ukraine air defense in the area. The second, the Russians managed to improve their guided bombs, so now they can reach Kharkiv from probably the territory of Russian Federation, and this is of course very terrible and very difficult situation. The Ukrainians now understand that from now on Kharkiv is no longer a secure place for living, and it's better if you have car, if you have some money, if you have some relatives in the west and the central part of Ukraine, to leave and abandon Kharkiv as fast as possible. And this is exactly what the Ukrainians start doing. Of course, from this perspective, this is the perfect situation for the Russians to launch an offensive operation, to start using guided bombs even more massively, because now they understand that in a week or in a month there are going to be no civilians in Kharkiv at all. This town is going to be completely abandoned. This is going to be another ghost town, and then the Russians can do whatever they like, and even to capture Kharkiv, forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. Of course, then the Ukrainians will be able to return back, but this is going to be a completely different story. Now we are moving to the line of combat contact, and first we're going to, before we move further, once again about Kharkiv area, also it's very important to understand the defense belts, the Ukrainian fortifications in the area, and maybe the quality and the picture is not so good, but we can make a conclusion that Kharkiv area and Sumy area are not well fortified, let's say in comparison with Zaporozhye direction or South Donetsk direction. Just let's move a little bit to Zaporozhye area. This is Zaporozhye, and this all yellow yellow dots is the fortifications, and this is South Donetsk direction. We see significant number of yellow dots, which confirms the significant level of fortifications. If we return back to Kharkiv area, we can see complete absence, just the borderline, and that's it. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground, and we have a lot of updates coming from Chasiv Yar. The Russians continue offensive operation, and the Russians capture the tree lines in front of the Chasiv Yar itself. The Russians are ready for further offensive operation. Now there is like a preparation period of time before the first attempt to start storming the eastern block of Chasiv Yar, and according to information we have, currently the Russians are storming the last defense belt between, let's say, Russian positions in Chasiv Yar itself. We are talking about this tree line. As soon as this tree line falls, then we can start counting days of, at least not of Chasiv Yar itself, obviously there are going to be a very long battle, a few months obviously, but the eastern block of Chasiv Yar will fall probably in 2 or 3 weeks after the Russians capture this final defense belt on this side of the river, of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. So today we're going to receive more updates, as I understand. Furthermore, we have different Western analytics who try to analyze the situation in the area, and according to information we have, according to the Western analytics, they're saying that when Ukraine loses Chasiv Yar, very likely this another loss during the year after Avdiivka can force the Western countries to start the negotiation process. Unlikely the Russians are planning to start any negotiations with the Ukrainians, because until taking under control complete Donetsk area and the Lugansk area, the Russians will not stop, and because they see that situation completely develops in their favor. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. Now we are moving to Bakhmut, to Avdiivka direction. So we have lots of interesting details from the territory. After the Russian big tank attack, during the next already third day passed since that attack, and we continue receiving more and more details and updates about those clashes, and we continue updating the map, showing further additional Russian progress to the west of Toninka. And according to information we have, the latest update is that according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over this territory, and now the Russians need just to cross the field and they will be able to enter Umanske. So approximately this is the Russian progress. The last geolocations we have during the previous 24 hours shows us the Russian control just over this tree line, or not even over entire tree line. We have posts, we have videos published by the Ukrainian forces of FPV drone strikes against the Russians in the area. So a lot of mappers have already updated the territory, and we have also the video of Ukrainian counter-attack on the direction. During the Russian tank rush, the Ukrainians were using up to 3 personnel carrier trying to attack the Russians. 3 Bradleys start movement in direction of Russian positions, but that was something like probably fake attack. 3 Bradleys were moving, heading to the Russian positions, but just soldiers from 1 Bradley landed in the area, and 2 more Bradleys, let's say, turned their machines back and returned back to the mainland. And during the retreat process, one of the Bradley got on the minefield and was destroyed. So this is the situation in the area. So if we return back to map, the Ukrainians were moving something like this on the Bradleys. They reached the area, 2 Bradleys turned back and started moving towards Umanske once again, and 1 Bradley was abandoned in the area. The infantry of armed forces of Ukraine landed along these tree lines, and probably they will start clashes for this defense belt. Something like that happened during the previous 48 hours. So we can see that the Russians reached the final defense belt, the final tree line in front of Umanske, Yasnobrodovka. Very likely today the Russians will continue pressure, and not just on the line between Toninka, Umanska, Yasnobrodovka. We're talking about this line. Obviously today the Russians will increase the pressure and will continue movements on the line between Toninka or Vodiane and Nitailova Pervomayska, because we have additional updates from different mappers confirming that the Russians managed to improve their positions and establish additional control over the tree lines in this direction as well. So this is approximately the Russian control by different mappers by the beginning of the 2nd of April. So we see that today the Russians will also continue pressure, and today they're going to establish control or to improve their positions along this line. Maybe the Russians have already done this, so today we're going to receive updates about this if it's true, and then the battle for the next defense belt on this direction will start. So the situation develops not in Ukrainian favor, and after the fall of Umanske, Snobrodovska, Nitailova, the Russians will continue moving further. And just I would like to point your attention to to one important thing. The Russians were taking Avdiivka, let's say 2 months. When talking about the active phase of offensive, without the battle for Terikon, we're talking about the situation when the Russians entered inside of the stronghold. Then the Russians were taking up to 1 month the area between Severna, Lastachkina, Orlovka. Then the Russians spent just few weeks to move further to the west. So as you can see, the Russians are increasing their speed, and the reason of that is that the further the Russians moving to the west, the less fortifications they see in front of them, and less prepared territories they see in front of them. So this is the main reason of increasing the speed of the Russians the further they're moving to the west. Furthermore, we got a geolocated confirmation of Russian presence in Severna. We got in the past we got a lot of updates from different sources that the Russians managed to answer, but there were no geolocated confirmations. On this video we can see the Ukrainian FPV drone strike the Russian artillery system inside of Semyonovka. So this is very important, and the building was damaged as well. So as we can see, very likely that the entire Semyonovka was already captured by the Russians. Today, very likely we're going to receive some updates from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, and maybe the Ukrainians already in the fields or among the fields and the tree lines. Also, the Russians published another very interesting video also from the area of Berdichi. On this video, for example, we can see the Ukrainian FPV drone. This is Ukrainian FPV drone, but this video was published by the Russians. Currently, the Russians found a solution how to capture the signal of FPV drone, and then how to, let's say, make problems for FPV drone operators of armed forces of Ukraine. So the Ukrainian FPV drone operator tried to manipulate with the drone, but the signal was captured by the Russians, and then the Russians landed the Ukrainian FPV drone in the area. So the Russians continue improving their electronic warfare equipment, and this is of course very, very nice for them. This will allow them to if they can do this massive, of course this can reduce the only weapon the Ukrainians can use and the Ukrainians are using right now, because we don't see Ukrainian artillery strikes, we don't see almost nothing from HIMARS, we just see from the Ukrainian side FPV drone strikes. And if the Russians find a solution how to suppress this type of weapon, this is going to be a very big damage for the Ukrainians. Very interesting details are coming from Vuhledar direction, and today we got another video of multiple launch rocket system bombing of the town, and this is very important because this is probably the fourth video just for 2 days of April, another significant strike. And if we increase the numbers of updates for 2 days, let's do this, we're gonna see that lots of strikes took place in the area, the coal mine, the fields, Vuhledar itself. So this activity of the armed forces of Russian Federation makes me think that very likely the Russians are about to start another wave of attack in the direction. Currently, I don't know for sure what exactly the Russians are planning to do, but due to the critical situation of the armed forces of Ukraine, Novomykhailovka, in Vadiana, very likely that it's time to make another, maybe the final attempt to storm the stronghold, because the previous 4 attempts were repelled by the Ukrainians. Also, we have the photos of the fortifications. We see a significant number of yellow dots in the area confirming the Ukrainian positions. And if you take a look at this map of these yellow dots, you can see just one important thing, that Ukrainians were preparing the defense belt to repel the Russian attack from the south. So the fortifications were establishing the way to, let's say, expect and to repel the Russians' attacks, let's say, from the south to the north. And so those fortifications didn't expect and didn't, let's say, I don't expect that the Russians will attack them from the east, because the Ukrainians didn't think that Avdiivka can ever fall under the pressure of Russian army. Furthermore, we got some details from Sever's direction. For now, we still haven't received any updates about the battle for Azdolovka or the situation along the railways or in the Bilagorovka. The Russians during the previous 24 hours continue suppressing and destroying Ukrainian artillery positions in the deep rear. So counter-artillery duels develops in complete Russian favor. A few more artillery systems of the armed forces of Ukraine were discovered, suppressed and destroyed with Krasnopol. So this activity, this counter-artillery duels, confirms that very likely in a day or two the Russians will make another attempt to attack the Ukrainian positions in Siversk area. And we got a few more updates from the South Ukrainian part. Today we got some details about the Russian strike against the Ukraine airfield in the area of Mykolaiv. I'll remind you that according to the Ministry of Defense, as a result of another missile strike, the Russians destroyed 3 Su-25 in the area of Mykolaiv on the airfield. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.